you remember the time when you first got interested in music as an art form?
I think it was after a motorcycle accident when I was a kid.
Funny enough.
When I was very young, um, all I wanted to do was race motorcycles, and maybe I was about 12 years old, and I had a motorcycle, and I crashed and hurt my back, and then I just started playing guitar while I was recovering, and I think from there it just never stopped.
Mm, interesting.
Yeah.
So you didn't
So
pick up to impress women.
no, I didn't pick it up to impress women. No, I do remember though in eighth grade, maybe I was about 14 or 15. I was an awkward kid. There was a bunch of cool kids that were in the back room and they were talking about guitar. And one of them mentioned to the other that, oh, I think that kid out there knows how to play guitar. And so they invited me in and I played a Judas Priest song.
Wow.
And then from there, I had friends.
Well, how about the singing part? How did that come as a means to an end, or did you also love singing?
Well, it was kind of a means to an end, but also I kept wanting to find a singer. I would audition people, and it wasn't long until the people that I auditioned I recognized were just not that great. So I decided to sing just temporarily, just to kind of until I found a singer, and here I am.
Hmm. Yeah. Which one came first? Was it the clean singing or the more harsh vocals?
It would have been clean singing because when I was younger, I used to sing with my family. We at Christmas time we would sing like Johnny Cash and Clancy Brothers and things. And yeah, so it was always clean to start. And it wasn't until I got a job at a restaurant and I had to wash dishes. And then when I was washing dishes, I could sing in the back room and it wouldn't bother anybody. So I started practicing there. And then after about 6 months of being a dishwasher, I got to the point where I could do the prep work for the appetizers, and by doing that, I would go into the freezer and just start to scream, I guess, because no one would hear me. So I learned how to do the harsh vocals by screaming at a wall of frozen chicken.
That's like there's nothing like minimum wage job to make you angry enough to practice some harsh vocals.
I don't even think it was anger. I just think it was because at the time, what we were listening to was all like Jane's Addiction or Soundgarden or Pantera or whatever. So all those singers could do that vocal style that I didn't know how to do. So anytime I went to practice it, it seemed too loud.
Hmm.
So if I was in the freezer, the walk-in cooler in the restaurant, no one would be able to hear me. So it seemed like a perfect place to learn. So yeah, I thank walls of frozen chicken and a walk-in cooler for my vocal technique.
That's like a Rocky Balboa of music going to the
I'll take it. I'll take it.
for sure. Did you struggle with the technique at first, or did you find comfortable way to do the harsh vocals fast?
Well, I did struggle for sure, and in fact, when I moved to Los Angeles and I started working with Steve, he sent me to a vocal teacher that was a famous guy, and he taught all these famous people in Los Angeles, and I went to the class, and I remember this singer saying, "Okay, sing me some stuff," and I did what I did. And he just looked at me and said, I suspect that you'll only be able to sing for about a year before you no longer can do that.
Wow.
Because I didn't have a technique. My technique was screaming at chicken, right? So I remember going back to Steve and saying, oh, the teacher thinks that I'm going to fuck up my voice. But again, here I am 35, 38 years later, and I'm still doing it. So
Yeah, that's very.
joke's on him.
Did you ever find out that because in the past you had some unhealthy habits and things like that, did they affect your voice so that when you stopped, you noticed a clear change?
Yeah, I found that combustible smoking was bad for my throat, as was whiskey.
Yeah, who
I
would?
remember I remember in about 2000, however, whoever it was when we were doing SYL, and before we went on stage every day, we just do shots of whiskey and drink and then smoke a bunch of joints. And at the time, I thought it was kind of macho, but then after a while, live, my voice just sounded like Marge Simpson, and it became clear to me that this was not sustainable.
How about when you record albums and you have all this range that you can show them there, but obviously doing tours and doing all this live shit night to night, you have to do all these extreme techniques that you have your operatic voice and growls and everything. How difficult is it to maintain your voice when you're on the road?
Well, I do about 40 minutes of warm up before every show. I mean, I think it's your best laid plans for sustaining your voice while on tour are often more in theory than in practice, because they say, okay, well, you have to get enough sleep. But touring, you never fucking get any sleep. You know, it's like you up at 6 o'clock and then you have to fly, and then you're in a bus and it's a rough road or whatever. It's like, and I sleep very poorly at the best of times. So I don't sleep well on a bus, and I rarely sleep well in a hotel either. So that's out the window. And they say, okay, well, you shouldn't eat, certain types of food, right? But when I tour, I tend to eat vegan. And so a lot of times, I mean, I'll eat whatever if there's nothing else. It's not like a fundamental thing other than just a daily dose of discipline that helps me in other ways. But yeah, a lot of the times you're just subject to whatever the catering is or whatever the food at the venue is. And a lot of times it's like cheese and tomatoes, right? Which are the worst possible thing for your voice. They say talking loudly is bad for your voice. Yet in order to facilitate the touring that we do now, I do VIP prior to the shows, which means talking to people. And so long story short, is all the things that you should do to sustain this type of singing technique on tour, touring doesn't allow. So I just have to cross my fingers and hope that it lasts. And for the most part, it does.
Yeah.
But there's been some shows where it's just, you just feed yourself to the wolves and just get it over with, right?
Yeah, for sure. What is your warm-up routine type? Like, what do you do when you do warm-up before the show?
Well, I do a series of exercises that start at the lowest note that I can sing to the highest note that I can sing. And I start quietly, and then I go through scales and arpeggios. And I do them with different consonants and different vowels, like ha, hey, go, gug. And then I do scales and arpeggios within that. And then at the end of it, I work on falsetto and the transition from falsetto to chest voice. And I do that as well as just a couple other, I've got a little plastic mechanism that I blow into that. I've been doing that now for maybe 25 years, that particular technique. And to the extent that I can understand what it's doing, my voice lasts longer now than it did before. So I'm going to keep doing it.
What is your lowest note you can sing, and what is the highest note that you can?
Well, the lowest note depends on how early in the morning it is, and the highest note depends on how late in the afternoon it is, right? But I've never checked. I have no idea, right? And I think that's one of the things with me as a vocalist that has been confusing, for me at least, is that because I still don't consider myself a singer, I just sing. And so when people talk about it, specifically professional singers, like I'll talk to people who are really professional singers, and they know the notes and they have the sprays and they do all these things, and they seem to understand their voice so well. And then they ask me questions about my voice, and I just feel like I'm in kindergarten. I'm like, I just scream until I taste blood, and then I hope it keeps working.
And it's like when you have to sing some low stuff, you will wake up early in the morning to go to the recording room.
Yeah, that's true, actually. That's true. When I get my lowest voice is when my voice starts getting damaged on tour. So about 2 weeks into a tour, all of a sudden in the morning I'm able to go. You know what I mean? But I'm a baritone, like I'm not a bass. So, and right on the verge between baritone and tenor, I would say, because I do both of those things. But other than that, man, I think everything I know about my voice, you now know.
Yeah. So we know as much as you do. Yeah, but it's also interesting to think about that. I guess I'm not a professional also either, but I feel like you could have technically been like an opera singer at some point. When you listen to some of your vocal takes, it's really, really powerful, and you can hold on really well.
Oh, thank you. I mean, sometimes I feel that way, but I also feel that I'm a vocal actor.
Yeah.
in that I can kind of sing opera, I can kind of sing metal, I can kind of sing all these things, but
Mm.
it's not because I'm a metal singer or I'm an opera singer or whatever. I just have a strong willpower.
Mm.
And so if I have written something that requires opera voice, then I can probably figure out how to replicate that. And if I've same thing with death metal vocals or quiet vocals, I can kind of do whatever I need to do. But I'm not a professional at any of those things. I think if you put me up beside an actual opera singer, it would underline how self-taught I actually am.
I mean, yeah, I guess so, but it doesn't really mean anything. You're not singing opera or anything. But
Yes,
yet you have your own operas in the
I
works.
do. Yeah,
We will hear about it soon, probably. But also, what
yeah,
you mentioned about being a vocal actor, I mean, you're also known, besides singing, you're playing characters, famously Tilda. And how did
yeah.
that voice come up? Like, how did you figure out the voice of Tilda? Mhm.
Yes. Ziltoid, like anything that I've done, was a surprise to me in the same way as it was to the audience. I didn't think, it would be great. I got something that I'm going to give to the audience next. It's going to be a puppet, and it's going to be fueled by coffee, and he's going to be an omnidimensional overlord that is just gets picked on by all the other aliens. Like that was never the intent. How the work tends to manifest for me is I just write randomly and then I put it into piles on my desktop. And then as they evolve, those things sometimes you'll get an idea for a theme or a concept that you think, oh, that's really cool. And I could use that pile of material to illustrate it. And Ziltoid was really, it's a great example of how I write because we had just had children. I had just quit strapping young lad and I had, come off some really bad habits on a personal level. The character seemed like a way for me to observe myself. It's like I don't understand how I feel right now about having kids. I just came out of this metal band, and I got this stupid hair, and I, feel like a weirdo or whatever. So when I started making this puppet, just as a hobby, I was looking at the face of this thing, and I was like, oh, he can be a personification of that frame of mind. By having something that I could draw from personally, the character then has a life. It's not like you're making like a version of Shrek or something. It's like no, Ziltoid is me. So it's easy to write. It's like okay, so if you were an alien, like a guitar playing alien from the fourth dimension or whatever, what would you sing about? What would you do? And if you're confused and if you're depressed or whatever those things are that's going on, then the alien becomes that. And so it becomes a vehicle for me to express myself that seems much more comprehensive than if I was to try to write from the point of view of like, well, here's just a song. And a lot of times the people that don't understand what I do, like within the scene, they look at it and they're like, well, why this fucking guy is always making like aliens or he's dressed up like a superhero, like what's the deal? And my whole thing with it is first off, that's what I felt like doing. And if somebody doesn't like it, I mean, I really, truly don't care. And then each one of these things that I do is based on trying to represent a certain period of my life to me. And they do. The writing process is usually I just work on intuition and I know when it's wrong before I know when it's right.
How did the voice come up? Did you have some inspiration for Tilda's voice?
Yeah, yeah. So my buddy Brian, who used to be in the DTP, when we were younger, because we grew up together, when we were younger, we used to make these little videos. And I had a sock puppet with two marbles that I just taped to the top of the sock. And I called him Ziltoid the Omniscient because I thought, oh, that's a alien name. And that's where the voice started. I started like, yes, right? And then it just evolved into this thing that it is now, which is super crude because I think in the beginning it was much more like, right? But then I remember when we played in Helsinki with the Ziltoid show, the first one, at that point, the voice started becoming much more malevolent. It became much more like the yes. And then it takes on a life of its own, right?
Do you ever speak to your children when they're young in this Tilda voice?
Well, I talked to my son like that, and he just looked at me like I was wearing his shirt, you know?
Yeah. And one thing about being a vocalist and also a guitarist, there comes the fact that you play pretty intricate stuff and you have to sing on top of it. Was that difficult for you to sort of manage both things at the same time?
Oh yeah, and sometimes it still very much is. So what I tend to do is hire guitar players that are better than me to play those parts. So I'll record them in the studio, but then live I'll just give it to Mike, and then I can just put my hands in the air and sing, right? So, and not all of it. And the other stuff, the stuff that I do, because obviously I do sing and play, a lot of that's just muscle memory. And sometimes I have to make little charts for myself, like with little chicken scratches. And I think here's like it's two levels. On one line it's straight lines, and I'm like, that's where your down pick is. And then I write the words over top. So this is down pick, where the down pick, and then I can sort of read it, and it becomes like a musical language that I can understand that helps me, right?
Yeah. How much did you practice both singing and playing guitar individually and together in the past versus how much you do it today?
I admit that my life has been so complicated over the past couple of years that I haven't practiced enough. And now that I've got shows being booked and tours coming up and all this sort of stuff, every time I pick up the guitar, my fingers are like sore. So I've set up a room in the back where I can practice singing and playing guitar simultaneously. And when I did it last week for the first time in a long time, whew, it was not good. By the time we get to Finland, though, it'll be good again.
I mean, we love you anyway. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, well, and vice versa. I love it there. Yeah.
How much did you practice in your sort of golden age of practicing when you did it the most?
All I did as a teenager was play guitar and masturbate. I think that's all I did. You know what I mean?
Which did you become better in by?
Oh, by guitar by a huge margin. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm a terrible I'm a terrible masturbator. But it's like but guitar is was where I was at. And but back then I would practice, like every other kid that was into it at the time. I would practice 8 hours a day kind of thing, 10 hours a day. That's all I did was play guitar, right? And nowadays it's I play guitar every day for sure. But the thing that I never recognized about becoming a full-time musician is how much of being a full-time musician doesn't include music. The amount of music that I made before I was a professional musician was 20 to 1 versus what I do now because my days are emails and interviews and gear and like presets and logistics and family stuff. And so when I finally do get a chance to play guitar now, it's like I'm like, oh God, this is rare.
I forgot how good it is. Yeah.
Oh, it is. That's true. That's true. And I also remember that my dexterity at one point was really, really accurate. And now sometimes after I haven't played for too long, it's like I'm wearing boxing gloves when I'm trying to play guitar. You know, it's like everything is just rough. But it doesn't take long. It usually just takes about a week to get it back. Same with the voice.
You can correct me if I'm wrong, but I find that it's interesting that you are known as a very skillful musician in many ways. But I find that your solo spots, you take more time to do it melodically and have some like I don't know word is soul or something. But you don't wank as much as the next guy would probably.
Well, I had the fortune of playing with some of the world's best guitar players. So it made it very convenient for me because I remember at a certain point hearing some of these players I was with, whether or not it was Steve or any of these other incredible players. And then I remember hearing them do a solo and thinking, "Oh, that's great. Now I don't have to worry about that. Like
Yeah.
they do that. That's not what I do." And for me, I mean, I've got a certain amount of proficiency like for wanking, but whenever I have a section in a song that I think a guitar solo should go there, always have thought of it more like a voice
Mm.
rather than like a technical exercise. Like as opposed to just doing raging arpeggios over the whole thing, I think, oh, it's if I was singing, what would the line be? And I kind of tend to default to that for guitar.
Mm. But you didn't go the route of like George Benson and sing on top of your.
I mean, yeah, I think no, I didn't. I think that if I did that and you just took the vocal track and soloed it, It would sound like I was having a stroke, right?
Yeah, I understand totally. Yeah, did you ever have this inferiority complex for to others because you have had the chance to play in the past with great guys, but also like recently, you know, you've met all these kind of animals as leaders and all this.
Oh yeah. No, no, I'm very confident in what I do,
That's
and I don't do that. You know what I mean? Like my whole musical trip is to be me, and I don't do that. I don't do what they do. I do what I do. And therefore, I can jam with anybody. Like you could put me in a room with any musician. It's not that I'm going to be as good as them, but I'm me. So if I'm listening to music and I think, oh, this section here requires something that I do, then I'm a perfect candidate for that. But also, if I have a guitar in my hands and I'm with a jazz trio, I don't know how much I'd have to say
mm,
because I'm not a jazz guy, right? So
interesting though.
I would probably do pads. I would probably do ambient stuff. And that's an example of like how I would treat an environment like that. I think, what can I offer to this? And so therefore, like when Animals as leaders and Tosin and Javier and everybody there, it's like when we jam together, which we do and which we have, there's no intimidation because I don't do that. I don't play like them. I don't do the thumping. I don't do that incredibly complex sweep arpeggio. Like that's not what I do. You know, it's like that silly quote about fish will think it's a failure if it's judged on its ability to climb a tree.
Yeah.
You know, like if playing Animals as leaders music is climbing a tree and I'm a fish, then why would I worry about it?
That's a very good point, I think. But on the point of jazz music, it would be interesting to hear you play one because I don't know if you ever heard the album. There was this album, of some guy who doesn't play jazz piano, but he recorded with a
Oh
band.
yeah? Yeah,
Yeah,
that'd be great.
it's
That'd be
exactly how you
great.
would think it sounds like, but it's funniest
Oh
thing.
yeah. I would like to hear that actually. I
Yeah,
have a feeling if I was to do it, it would probably be similar. I would just play a bunch of wrong notes and pretend that it was tasteful.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And now you have this new record coming up once again. You're a very prolific man, but was there any challenges when it comes to, or not necessarily challenges, but are there any new approaches for your vocals and your guitar playing there?
Power Nerd was a very difficult record to make for a lot of reasons. It started as being an easy record. It's the first record of 4 records. In almost every way, it's like Devin Townsend Project Part 2, in a sense. And Power Nerd I wanted because the Moth and Axolotl and everything else I'm doing is so complicated that I thought before I challenged an audience again by saying, hey guys, here's something fucked up, I thought I would offer a white flag of Power Nerd first and say, well, here's some songs, right? Here's some rock songs. But during the making of it, my family went through a period of really intense grief. The lyrics in Power Nerd ended up being about how to deal with loss of a loved one, loss of, how to deal with death. And the contradiction is that it's simple music. It's like rock music, but all the lyrics are so depressed. It was like I've never been through that level of sadness while trying to make a record. So Power Nerd ended up being a really surprisingly intimate and melancholy record rather than what it started as, which was like a party record. So the combination was very unique for me.
But I feel like perhaps it's for the best that the album became what you needed it to be at that
I
time.
agree. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's going to, regardless, that's just the nature of it. But this one in particular, I think in the past, whenever I went through some sort of, somebody died or something, I don't think I processed it. I think I just kind of pushed it away. But this time I couldn't. And I had the deadline already, so I couldn't, you know what I mean? I had to finish it. And so by the time it gets to the end of the record, like Glacier and Goodbye, the hardest part about making this record was just singing it. It was just lyrically, it was just so. I was just really, it was really a difficult thing, and I like up to this point, I never really cried in my life. Like I don't cry, but that's all I did for the whole thing. It was just I couldn't stop. It's like it was coming out, and so trying to sing while that was happening was so fucking difficult, man. Like I've never. Yeah, the last chorus of Goodbye, I was just like, I couldn't get through it. It took me so long to get through that. In the long run, I think it's healthy. I think the fact that for the first time, I actually was forced to sort of surrender to the intensity of those emotions. I think it was something that maybe has been needing to happen for many years. So I'm very proud of the record as a result of that, strangely.
Yeah, for sure. And sorry for your loss. That's sad.
Thank you.
I don't want to end in a somber note, so I'm trying to think of something. Can you tell some funny mishappening in your course of becoming a musician? Something you
Well,
remember?
actually, if we don't want to end it on a somber note, that's why I ended the record with Ruby Quaker, the coffee song,
Yeah, yeah.
because that's exactly the decision that I made at the end. Because prior it had ended with goodbye, and I thought it's too much to leave people with. That's not how I want to end it.
Mm.
Because the process of grief on the other side of it, there is resolution. So I ended it with Ruby Quaker. So you could be like, that was so difficult. And then the next day it's like, hey, do you want a coffee? And I'm like, yeah, I want a coffee. And so I think that that leaves it so it's not on a somber note. On another level, some sort of story that has happened on tour. Remember, we're in the middle of Texas and there was no air conditioning on the bus. And it was so hot. It was like sweat on the inside of the bus. It was so hot. And there was all these people on the bus. There was women and a bunch of guests and everything. And I woke up and we couldn't get into the venue and I had to take a shit like I've never had to take a shit before. And I thought, oh, I'll shit in a bag in the bathroom and then I'll just run out and throw it away and no one will notice. And so I shit in this bag in this really, really hot bus. And then I opened the door to run outside and it just exploded. And the whole bus was just unusable for the next 30 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny that always when you have to think about something funny, you will eventually just result to talk about, shit and piss and stuff like that.
Farts as well. I think that it's like, I think maybe it's because I think that everything else in life is just so grim most of the time that it's like I default to that because I know it can, I know it can bother people, right?
Yeah, yeah, I understood. Yeah.
It's great talking to you, brother. Thank you for the support, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?
So thank you so much, man, and hope to see you soon.